The morning fog clung low over the empty fields of County Clare, thick enough to swallow the horizon and cold enough to sting the bones. The wind came from the Atlantic, sharp, wet, and unforgiving. Liam Odoran trudged along the narrow dirt road with his shoulders hunched and his breath turning to mist in front of him. His coat, once sturdy leather, now hung in torn strips that let the cold seep straight into his skin. The soles of his boots were worn through, and each step felt like walking on ice. He had not eaten in 2 days. Hunger burned in his stomach like a knife, then faded into a hollow ache. He had grown used to that feeling. What he could never get used to was the cold. His hands trembled violently as he leaned against the stone fence dividing the road from a small, lonely cottage. Smoke rose from its tiny chimney, thin, but real. Warmth. A scent too faint to trust drifted across the air. Something cooking. Something he had almost forgotten the smell of. His knees buckled, and before he could steady himself, he fell into the mud with a dull thud. Inside the cottage, Mara de Vega looked up from her small hearth. She had been stirring a thin pot of potato soup, the last meal she had for the day, maybe for tomorrow as well. Ireland had not been kind to her since her husband died. The fields were poor, the winters harsh, and money even scarcer. But she kept going because that was what she had always done. Her family back in Iloilo had taught her that kindness mattered more than wealth. Even when you had almost nothing, you gave what you could. A sound outside made her pause. Not the wind. Heavier. A body hitting the ground. She rushed to the door, pushed it open, and gasped when she saw the man collapsed by her fence. His face was pale, almost bluish, and his hands were shaking violently. She knelt beside him without hesitation. "Sir? Can you hear me?" she whispered, lifting his head gently. His lips moved, but no words came out, only a faint breath. She slid her arm under his shoulders, gritting her teeth as she helped him stand. He was heavier than he looked, but desperation gave her strength. Inside, she guided him to the chair beside the fire. She wrapped his hands between hers, trying to warm them. His eyes fluttered open, confused, then softened when he saw her face. She ladled the soup into a bowl, the entire portion, and set it before him. "Eat," she said quietly. "Please. No one should suffer alone." He stared at her with eyes full of exhaustion and disbelief. Then a single tear slid down his cheek as he picked up the spoon. The storm rolled across County Clare for 3 straight days, trapping Liam inside Mara's small cottage. Rain hammered the roof like thrown stones, leaking through old boards he had tried to patch with whatever scraps he could find. Each time a drop splashed onto the wooden floor, he felt guilty, as if the house's suffering were somehow his fault. He wished he could give her more than his tired hands and borrowed strength. Mara moved quietly through the room, mending an old wool blanket with careful stitches. The lantern beside her flickered, illuminating her tired eyes and the faint smile she wore whenever she worked. She never complained. She never asked for anything. She simply gave, warmth, food, space, without expecting a single thing in return. Liam watched her from the chair near the fire, feeling a knot tightening in his chest. She didn't know who he really was. She didn't know what he had run from, or what kind of family bore the name Odoran. To her, he was just a cold, starving cowboy who collapsed by her fence. But he was more than that, worse, in many ways. The Odoran Ranch wasn't known for mercy or generosity. It was known for power. For hooves thundering through the land. For men who took what they wanted and crushed whatever stood in their way. He was born into that world, the youngest of 3 brothers, each harder than the last. His father ruled the ranch like a king. His brothers followed in his footsteps, cold, ambitious, ruthless. Liam had never fit. He loved the horses, not the fighting. He loved silence more than shouting. And when he refused to take part in a violent feud his brothers sparked, they cast him out. They didn't say the words, but they didn't need to. A few punches. A split lip. A toss into the mud. And then the gate closed behind him. He had walked away with nothing but a shredded coat and a promise to himself that he would never return. Now, watching Mara gently fold the finished blanket, he felt shame weigh on him heavier than any winter cold. He hadn't told her anything, not out of deception, but out of fear she would see him differently once she knew the truth. She looked up suddenly, catching his gaze. Her smile was soft, almost embarrassed. "I hope this keeps you warm tonight. The storms aren't kind." Liam swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "You don't know what you've done for me," he said, voice barely steady. "You've shown me more kindness in a week than my own blood has in years." She blinked, surprised. "Liam, anyone would have helped." He shook his head slowly. "No. Not anyone." In the dim firelight, he made a silent vow. He would repay her kindness. He would stand for her the way no one had stood for him. Even if it meant facing the very family he had spent months running from. The storm finally broke after weeks, leaving the air heavy with the smell of wet earth. Mara stepped outside to hang the last bit of laundry she owned, her hands stiff from the cold. The yard was quiet except for the dripping of rain from the thatched roof. She didn't notice the distant rumble at first, she thought it was thunder rolling over the hills again. But thunder didn't grow louder. And it didn't come in rhythm. Hoofbeats. Slow at first, then multiplying, pounding the ground like drums of war. Mara froze, her heart tightening. Her eyes darted toward the road where the mist hung thick like smoke. Shapes formed inside it, dark silhouettes, riders pushing through the fog with heavy coats and wide-brimmed hats. She counted 2, then 5, then a dozen. More. Far more than she had ever seen in her life. The ground trembled under the weight of horses, their snorts cutting through the cold morning air. Fear washed over her. She had nothing worth stealing, but desperate men didn't always need a reason. "Liam," she called, voice cracking as she backed toward the cottage door. "Liam, riders are coming." He pushed the door open instantly, still fastening his coat, his hair wild from sleep. But the moment he saw the riders, he went still. His face, usually gentle, tightened into something hard, almost fearful, almost resigned. "It's them," he whispered. Before she could ask who, the riders surged into the yard. 20, maybe more. Powerful stallions splattered mud across her doorstep as they stopped in perfect formation. The men wore the same insignia on their coats, a silver horse head stitched over deep green. The mark of the Odoran Ranch. Liam stepped forward slowly, and the riders parted for him. Mara watched, breath held, as he walked toward the man at the front, a tall, broad figure with a dark beard and eyes sharp as cut glass. Liam's oldest brother. The brother dismounted in one smooth motion. Mara expected anger, violence, something cruel, everything she imagined from the stories Liam had never fully told. But instead, he removed his hat and bowed his head to her. "Mara de Vega," he said, voice rough with something that surprised even him, "Our brother says you saved his life." She stood frozen, unsure whether to nod or run. "You fed him when he had nothing," the man continued. "You gave him shelter. Warmth. A place in this world. We came to honor that." Liam turned to her, his eyes wet. "You gave me a reason to go back. And because of you, they're here, not in anger, but in respect." The riders lowered their hats as one, a gesture she had seen only at funerals or holy moments. For the first time since her husband died, Mara felt her chest loosen, a tremble of hope rising in her throat. She had helped one shivering cowboy, and now an entire ranch stood in her yard, offering protection, loyalty, and something she never thought she'd feel again. A future.